Kate, welcome. I am super excited to connect. I'm not going to say how long it's been, but
I know. We've known each
just
other a really long time.
a few years from back in the high school days.
Yeah.
And
Just like 10 years ago.
yeah, yeah. And how crazy is it? And while you and Mike were in the same grade, you and Mike end up together. Kathy and I, are married. So we both really kind of
Came
uh,
back to high school.
came back to high school. And
Well, and
how wild is that?
not to interrupt, but I'm actually younger.
No, I
So
know.
he was
Yeah, no,
actually a year older than me. Actually,
mm-hmm.
2 years, but in
Yeah,
school a year older.
yeah.
But yeah, it's so crazy because you and Kathy have the same exact kind of situation where I graduated from high school, picked up, moved out to Los Angeles, started my life out there.
Mm-hmm.
Mike had graduated, moved down to Texas and started his life in Texas, had gotten married, had kids, got divorced. I was doing the whole entertainment industry career thing.
Mm-hmm.
And my sister Chrissy, now
Mm-hmm.
Jake's Chrissy Lacey, reached out to me when I was going up to a film festival. And she's like, "Do you remember Mike Kiley from high school? And I just really think you guys would hit it off." And I'm like, "Yeah, whatever. I'm not
Yeah,
dating some
yeah,
dude
yeah.
from Texas." And
Mm-hmm.
cut to 10 years later, we're married and I live in
And
Texas.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Like you and
exactly.
Kathy too. I love that you and Kathy have that same kind of thing because isn't it so I don't know what it is, but there's something about being with somebody who has the same roots that you connect on a different level.
Yeah, and even though, I mean, Kathy and I hung out a little bit in high school, but not a lot. But just kind of coming back and reconnecting after all of these years, it was really just a matter of, it was kind of right and it felt right. And,
Yeah.
things just happen for a reason.
And just a
And
better
it happens for an
understanding of each
amazing,
other,
yeah.
like understanding, like we are both like big Irish Catholics and
Mm-hmm.
same type of family, same type of like even just mutual friends, because Mike and I really didn't know each other that well.
Yeah.
I knew of him, but we never really talked.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he remembered me as a cheerleader, he admitted. But 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 it after, especially after dating probably every generation of moron that exists, it was so nice to have this guy that like I could
Yeah.
talk about like hanging out with my friends at Nathan Bill and
Mm-hmm.
like, all these things
All
that
those
he
fun
did
stuff.
too.
It was
Yeah,
funny. I was just talking to Marty Caproni, and we were talking
yeah,
about those
I saw
exact
that.
same things hanging out at Nathan Bell.
I know. It's so well, and it's so crazy because I was just back there. I went, thank God my parents got vaccinated. And
Mm,
so I was finally able to come home and see them,
yeah,
which was like, it was
amazing. Yeah.
amazing. Like the amount of relief I felt after they got vaccinated was just
Hmm.
insane. But I went back there and I was just driving down by Nathan Bill and all these things. And I'm like, man, I first of all, having teenage boys now, like, because I have two stepsons, I'm like, I don't
Yeah,
want to know that you're at the age and older than I was when I was
kind
partaking
of.
in some crazy parties there.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah,
insane.
it's a little wild to think about. It gets a little surreal. You're just like, and then I'm thinking to myself, but I'm not that old, so I don't really know what
I
happened,
know. We're
and it's
like
like
in our 30s,
crazy.
so it's weird.
It's wild. I know. I know. So speaking of just kind of moving up and leaving Massachusetts
Yeah.
and heading to LA, did you always know that that was something that you wanted to do? Like that's
Yeah.
fascinating for me because I'm actually talking to Jason Lassard as well, and
Oh,
he up in
we just Facebook connected.
yeah, like we're heading, he went up to Alaska, and that at that age that just baffles me to just even think about doing something like that. So I'm really kind of interested to, you know,
Yeah. Well, I knew from the time I have memories, I knew I always loved entertaining people. I
mm,
always loved making people laugh. And I remember like we would go to Canada when we were kids. We would go up for a week with my grandparents and my parents and aunts and uncles,
mhm,
and And I remember putting on like shows, like on the picnic table where we would like do dance recitals or something.
Yeah.
And I remember like people would ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I actually would say a comedian because I loved like Robin Williams and Billy
Yeah.
Crystal's stand up. And it's funny because I remember watching when I was too young to really get the joke, but they were so great in their delivery that I loved that. And so I always knew I wanted to entertain. And then when I was in high school, it's funny because I went to one drama club meeting and I was joking around with a friend, and I can't remember who. I want to say, was it Mrs. Wesowitz or somebody? Was like I don't remember. No, it wasn't that one. Anyway, somebody was the teacher, and I just remember she was not happy with me, and I remember like shutting down, and I was like, this is not. I shouldn't do this. This is not for me. And so I didn't do it in high school. And I remember too trying to be like too cool for school. Or I'm like, whatever, I don't even want to do it. And like secretly I'm crushed, like devastated.
That's too bad, right? Like just because it was your way of expressing something, you kind of tucked it away for a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm also 100%. And I feel like, particularly in today's world, it's nice to be a little bit more open to what kids are, how they express themselves or whatever. But it worked out for me because I then went on to college where I could kind of reinvent myself and really pursue what I wanted to pursue. And so then I was nothing but an actress and nothing but performing arts and and that was my whole college career. And so
where did you go to school? Did you go to school in LA?
Out of high school, I will say, probably not too proud to admit that I barely graduated from Cathedral, like skin of teeth. I really enjoyed high school. I had a lot of fun.
Kate, you and I are similar in a lot of ways, especially like after my father passed, like the last 2 semesters, like I really didn't do anything. And I had to do like multicultural day to get extra credit so that I could graduate because I just didn't do anything. And then out of high school, I didn't even want to go to school. So I took 2 years off before I then went back to college.
Well, I did community college. So I went to Holyoke Community College, which big props to them because it was fantastic experience. And also, to be honest with you, I don't really get why we don't encourage that more for
I went to
kids.
HCC. It was great. Like what a great way to.
First of all, who knows what they want to do? Like I was lucky, but there's like, how do kids know what they want to do at 16, 17, 18 years old? And like having the ability to save money while you're figuring it out, it just makes so much sense. But I think there's so much pressure to like, you have to get into a good school and you have to be accepted to a great school. And so like,
and you have to come away with $250,000 in debt, sometimes financially it doesn't always make sense either, and
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like why waste the money when you're just trying to figure out what it is that you want to do? And it's purely a stigma. That's it. That's the only reason. It's because there's a stigma attached to community college. Okay, well, it worked for me. But so but here's the thing. Here's the difference between us. You were dealing with something very heavy in high school.
But even before that, Kate, I enjoyed school, and I wish that I had put the knowing now and what I've done for myself and the way that I've guided things and realizing the work that it takes to achieve these things. I wish that I had applied that a lot sooner because I had I had the ability. It's not that I didn't have the ability. I just didn't apply it, in the right way.
I don't know about you, but the older I've gotten, the more I've come to realize how ADHD I am. And that wasn't a thing, right? When we were in school, like it was like settle down, relax, stop being so anxious.
I couldn't sit still for the life of me. And then I had asthma. So I was put on this medicine called Sloughlin. And that in itself made me off the wall. Like I had no ability to sit down and pay attention to anyone or anything.
Yeah. And I think that's the problem, is that because it wasn't a thing, educators didn't really know how to address it. And so I would sit through, I'm not kidding, like I used to draw. Like I was so bad at school that I remember doing this in every single class. I would draw this in the beginning of class. Okay. And every 15 minutes, I would shade in the 15 minutes,
15 minutes.
so that I could count down until class was over.
Wow,
because I couldn't focus, and I'm a daydreamer. So I would be like in the clouds or like living my life in Hollywood while I'm sitting in ninth grade.
Using all of that creative stuff that like people kind of don't really, unless you are kind of in that, some people don't understand it because it's just like, oh, your head's in the clouds. Well, yeah, it is, because I'm thinking of some pretty cool shit.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I think happened. And so that kind of like led me to like barely graduating, but I'm very big at lessons and blessings. So like when I come up to challenges or tragedy or anything in life, I think, what are the lessons and blessings? Because if we don't look for those, then it's all negative and all bad and we get crushed. So for me, I feel like the lessons and blessings of me barely graduating were that I was able to go to a community college where I was able to really establish my roots, where I was able to really bring up my GPA, where I was able to then be able to get into Emerson College, which is one of the best acting schools in the country. And so it's like, had I not gone that path, my entire life would be completely different. And so I went on to Emerson and got my acting degree. And again, I was raised, my parents are incredible. We're so lucky because we had the perfect combination of people person and my mom who could talk to a cashier for 5 hours, and my dad, who is also a people person, but a really incredible businessman and really a driven, ambitious person. And so having those two qualities in myself, so having both of those qualities is a part of who I am. It was never a question that if I had decided I was committing to acting, which I had, that I was going to do it at the highest level. Never a question. Like, it wasn't like, well, but maybe I can't. It's like, no, I'm going to do this. So I'm going to do it the best that I can do it, which required me to go either to New York City or Los Angeles. My parents my dad got a job in the Los Angeles area when I was in college. And so really my decision to move to LA was, one, I'd always wanted to move to LA, but two, I'd had the ability to experience living out there for a little bit when my parents were out there. And so as soon as I graduated, I packed up a U-Haul with my best friend from kindergarten and we drove cross country. And here's the thing is, I really do feel like I was blessed to be born with knowing what it is that I was meant to do in this world and my purpose, which, by the way, didn't actually turn out to be acting for me, but it was knowing that I wanted to act or entertain people that led me to my current role as a producer, which is basically telling it's the same thing. It's entertaining people, but it's telling stories on a bigger scale. And I think the unfortunate thing is, I know there are a lot of people who don't know what that is in their life.
Well,
and
a lot of people, we kind of go on this path, and especially our generation, right? Like our parents really went through a lot. Their parents went through a lot. And so, we were a generation, I think, of individuals that just worked 60 hours a week and wanted to climb this ladder and just had your head down and really didn't focus on yourself. And I didn't really get that until after my mom passed, when I had lost my identity. For 6 years, my identity was taking care of mom. And then after that happened, I was just like, well, now what? Like, I really needed to find that. So then I went on this journey of trying to just understand who I was. And that led me to understanding what my passions were, what my purpose was, and that we all have something to give. We all have something bright inside of us. And it's just a matter of discovering it, developing it, and then giving that back to the world.
Well, and I was just talking to Mike about this, like this idea that everybody is good at something, right? Like every single individual alive is extraordinary at doing one thing.
Yeah.
And the sad thing is knowing that some people don't get a chance to find out what that one thing is and struggling to find it. And my feeling has always been, and again, growing up Catholic and my relationship with God, which I kind of have more of I'm not as devout a Catholic as I once was in my life, but I do still have a very strong relationship with God and faith in my life. And I honestly feel like your gut instinct is God's way of communicating with you, right? So if we have like this gut instinct, everybody says, oh, you always got to trust your gut instinct. I truly feel that that's God's form of guiding you. And so I always say to those people who are kind of struggling or lost or not knowing, I just break it down to the basics. What brings you joy? What makes you happy? Does it make you happy to help others like you? So yes, then that's a calling for you. So go towards that, you know, like, and follow your gut instincts there. Cause I feel like that's what's going to lead you ultimately. Like my gut instinct was to entertain people. I love doing that. And so I followed my gut instinct to a way that I thought I could do that in acting, which led me to another, but you know.
Well, and that's it. And it's really, it's our own internal North Star. So, I mean, I was certainly brought up, you know, Catholic as well, but my attraction to that is more universal, right? Like the universe has energy and that's really where, whether it be God, with the universe, it's still that same understanding that we have this understanding deep within inside, and that gut instinct is never wrong if you follow it for the right reasons and you have all of that. Like it's leading you down a path which ultimately may lead you somewhere else, but you can never get there unless you start on that path.
Yeah, and I think that people, you know, I think that sometimes the struggle comes in like, okay, well, but is this my gut instinct or is it something else? And you know, like, how do I know if it's my gut instinct? And
explore it.
Well, right. And I think it's because we let in too much noise. Like we have all of this noise and all of these voices, and it's like, just stop.
We have other people's opinions about who we're supposed to be.
Let go of all of that.
We have other people's opinions about this specific topic because it wasn't right for them and they didn't like it. And so, oh, well, maybe I won't like it. Well, how do you know? You haven't tried it. And that's,
I feel like we as a society are way too concerned with other people's thoughts opinions of our life.
Yeah.
Like, because I honestly, look, I'm human, so clearly I don't want to have people not like me or not respond positively. But does other people's perceptions and opinions of who I am as a person and the choices that I'm making matter to those choices? Absolutely not. And if you know, I will sidebar to say I still consider other people's opinions. So I'm not talking about like that inner circle. I'm talking about like other people who don't really matter. Well, I don't worry about that because I'm waking up with me at 50, 60, 70 years old. So
and that's it. That's 100%. I will, especially people that are close to me, I will take in other people's opinions, other people's ideas, but at the end of the day, I have to make the decisions for myself. And so the one thing about that not a lot of people do is a lot of people don't really define what it is that they're ultimately looking to do, right? So if you don't know where you're going, then you can't really understand how you're going to get there. And so that's really, you know, understanding that you wanted to entertain people. And it was like, okay, well, I'm going to do that in a couple of different ways. And so here's how I can pursue that.
Right. You know? And the thing is nobody else knows your personal journey. I don't, you know, it's like things can make sense for somebody else looking from the outside in. They could say, oh, well, why don't you do this? Or why are you doing that? Or whatever, based off of their own life experiences and what they've come to know of life through those lens. That's not mine. That's not my experience in this world. And so I feel like we really need to stop wasting time making decisions for our own lives based on how other people perceive them. Because are you waking up with them when you're 60, 70 years old having regrets? You know?
Yeah, I love it. It's Yeah, keep
Well, I was
spreading
gonna
that
say
message. Yeah.
this that the one time in my life that this applies most to was, so quick kind of encapsulation of the history. I moved out to Los Angeles, got an internship to learn more about the business for my acting. It
Hmm.
was in feature film casting at the Warner Brothers Studios, which led to me leading into like a decade-long career in casting.
Yeah.
Um, which I was actually hired at the Walt Disney Company in live action feature films and went from an assistant to an executive within the department.
Oh,
Did that
great.
very quickly. And
Yeah.
so at 29 years old, I found myself in one of those places where I realized that I fell into casting and never really wanted to do it, but I was really good at it. And I connected to it. I could read with actors, so I was appeasing that creative side,
Hmm.
but it wasn't my dream job.
Mm.
And I felt like a sellout. And I remember thinking, you're going to regret your life. If you keep doing this, you're going to regret your life. What are you doing? You have to quit. But it was this incredible job. And, you know, I'm an executive for a feature film studio at 28, 29 years old. That's
Hmm.
incredible. And I should be appreciative and I should, you know, but I was miserable. And so I made the decision to quit my job and go back to try to pursue acting and the life that I thought I was supposed to be living. And
Yeah.
it's the one time in my life where I was so consciously aware of how I would be perceived by others. And, you know, working in casting, it's kind of like this one of those jobs where people want to be your friend, right? Because you're a buyer, because
Oh,
you can
sure.
give them
Yeah.
something. And you know, and I was going from that role in Hollywood to
To the other side, right?
oh, like you're gonna want to be an actress, like, okay, you know. And it crippled me, which is, by the way, why I stayed in casting for 10 years. But when
Mm.
I finally made the decision to not worry about that and to say, who cares? If they think that, they think that. They don't know my life experience. They don't know my dreams and desires and hopes.
Hmm.
Okay, I can't control it. And so I jumped off the cliff, and
Yes.
it was the best decision I ever made in my life. And
Yeah.
it led to everything. It led to me producing. It led to me finding my husband. It led to everything that was meant for me in my life started in that moment.
Yeah. And I love that analogy of jumping off the cliff because I quote Steve Harvey all the time because he's a big advocate. Whenever you hear Steve Harvey
Mm-hmm.
talk, he's always just like, at some point you have to take a leap. You
Mm-hmm.
have to, do some of those things. And that's just it's a great analogy of
And I
just
was following
of
God's instinct
understanding.
again. You
Yeah.
know, my gut was pushing me and saying, this is what you should be doing, so you need to do it.
Yeah.
And once you embrace that, it's such a beautiful thing. And by the way, all the friends that I thought I would lose and all that, my most powerful friends in Hollywood are to this day good
This
friends in my life and biggest supporters that I had.
That's fantastic. And so what was casting like? Like what is that whole process like?
So casting is the process of putting actors in the roles in television and
Hmm.
films and theater productions. And so for me, it was awesome. I mean, I loved it because I had this unique ability to be able to know what it is that the producers, director, whatever that creative team is looking for,
Hmm. Hmm.
but be able to translate it through the heart of an actor, right?
Yeah.
Because I
You were
was
making
able
that
to
match. Yeah.
yeah, and I was able to
Yeah.
understand both sides of it. And so I always loved that. My being in sessions, pre-reads, so pre-reads are an audition
Hmm.
process. It's like the first level of auditioning to get a part. And callbacks or producer sessions is like the next level of auditions, right? I loved those sessions because it was when I got to play with actors. And that was
Hmm.
always the most fun part for me. That and getting to be a part of telling an actor that they got a part or telling their agents that they
Yeah.
got the part was
Yeah.
always just so cool.
Yeah.
It was
Which is
awesome.
why, yeah, it really, I kind of relate that a lot to recruiting because
Yeah.
it's such a feel good type of thing. And I would imagine you probably have a lot of empathy, right? So you're able to kind of, feel that from somebody and
Yeah. And also,
kind of
you
just
know,
have that.
well, on the flip side of the excitement of being able to let an actor know they got the part, there was also the side of letting
Of,
actors know they didn't get a part. And I
yeah.
always, my whole thing with rejection, because rejection is such a huge part of this business. I still deal with it all the time personally.
Hmm.
And, it's one of those things where I continue to say, you cannot look at rejection as a statement on you. It's not. There's one person who is right for every role, and you just weren't that person.
Hmm.
Right. And so it's nothing you did wrong. It's just that you weren't that person. And I think that applies to life too. It's like there's so many opportunities that we want in life, or so many things that we fight for or we work for and we don't get, and we feel like a failure, or and it's like, no, that opportunity just wasn't for you.
Yeah. I
It's
love
that
that.
simple.
It really is.
Yeah.
And so, had you done any acting while you were in
Yeah.
this casting
So
bit, or
no,
was
no,
no?
I put
Okay,
it totally on hold.
it
And
was
because I felt like, again, coming kind of from my dad's side, when if we dedicate ourselves to something, we do it 100%,
yeah.
and otherwise don't do it. And so I couldn't do. I tried to like do this sketch comedy thing, but it was too. I couldn't really. I felt like I was splitting my focus, and so I dove into the casting
Hmm.
100%, and um, and I quit because I couldn't faithfully and completely give myself to casting when my mind wasn't and my
There's,
heart wasn't in it. And
but I would imagine that a lot of what you were doing while you were casting and doing those reads also then helped you
yeah, it was
take
able
that
to,
reverse
yeah,
side
work that
to,
muscle.
yeah, all
Yeah.
along. So it wasn't like
Yep.
wasn't like you weren't kind of working at it. You were just doing it in a different capacity, which
Yeah.
then allowed you to then make that switch, right?
Right. And what was cool is after I quit my job at Disney, which, by the way, my boss, Marsha Ross, was so incredible. And like,
Mm,
she actually held my job for me for like 6 months in case I changed my mind. She was
that's amazing.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
But what happened is when I quit, I had some agent and manager friends that were like, "Hey, would you mind working with my client? I'm getting some bad feedback from them in auditions, and just wanted to see if you could like figure it out." And I wasn't doing anything. So I was like, yeah, sure. So I started working with actors doing that, my favorite part of casting, which was that reading part. And I'd
Hmm.
worked with, a couple actors that I was like, oh yeah, they're not doing this. And they were like easy little tweaks that I could work on. Well, that actually led to this coaching business starting when I quit. And I was so lucky because I worked with so many awesome
Yeah.
actors. One of them is Mahershala Ali, who we worked on House of Cards together, which was like his breakout role. And now, of course, he's Academy Award winning, like
You know.
amazing guy. But he's such a good human being, though. And
Yeah.
that's what I think is important is there's some people in this business that maybe like they don't deserve the success so much. He 100% deserves every bit of
Yeah.
success.
That's
But I
fantastic.
was able to
Yeah.
like work with people like that. And so it's just funny as another reminder of like, oh, I quit my job and I think I'm going to lose this thing. And it opened up this whole like area of my life that I never would have ever imagined.
But it's nice because you had obviously built up a nice reputation of kind of who you were and what you did, which then
Yeah.
allowed
Contacts and relationships. Yeah.
an easier relationship with this, which then led into and so what is I'm fascinated because I know that you've had a lot of different kind of parts
Yeah.
and what is that like?
Yeah.
I have such a so I will tell you for me, like I love one-on-one conversations. I can do this with anybody.
Yeah.
Um, the first time I did a TED Talk at Hanover where I was working,
Yeah.
I wore two t-shirts because the sweat that was coming down the back was just tremendous, and I knew that was going to happen. And so, I mean, some people just don't have that, and I understand that. For me, it's completely foreign because I get so caught up in my own emotion that
Yeah.
I bring out all of this anxiety for myself.
Yeah. I think, well, one, going back to like, I had always, keep in mind in
You would always
college,
be.
all I did was theater. So it was literally in front of huge audiences. Like that was my whole jam, was performing in front of big audiences. And so that was actually a comfort zone to me. I'll tell you what was weird is after having received a BFA, studying under Kristen Linklater and like all this training that I have.
For those
And
who don't know, what is a BFA?
Bachelor's of Fine Arts. So
Okay.
a degree in acting.
Yeah, I wasn't. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. You would think that when I left casting after, and which is nothing but like involving the audition process, you would think that when I went back to acting, I could handle auditioning. And it was weird. Working in casting did some kind of weird psychological glitch for me, and I was not good at auditioning, and I couldn't figure it out because I was like, I know how to do this part, I know how to audition, but something about, and I honestly think it was that perception thing where I was on that side, and so I was feeling like, oh, they're judging me to make sure that I actually can be an actress because they only know me from casting and I have to prove myself. And I was putting all this unnecessary nonsense on myself. And so the auditioning process stuff was quite scary to me, which was bizarre because I tell actors all the time, like, don't be nervous. It's me. Like, but I was fortunate enough to nail a few of them. And I had a recurring on this small nurse role on Private Practice, and I did a guest star on NCIS, which Mark Harmon, nicest guy in this business, hands down, awesome human. And I had a recurring role as a coroner on NCIS Los Angeles. I was in a few movies, but like smaller things. But yes, I was like really fortunate. And I will tell you, where you were like, sweaty, and my first time on a set, especially a procedural, which is like NCIS, CSI, those kinds of shows, I was not prepared for how uncreative it was. Like, you don't show up on set and they're like, let's talk about your intentions for the role. It's like, okay, here's your mark, you're going to walk over here, you're going to hand him this thing, you're going to go back to your mark, you're going to turn, but don't turn too much because we don't want to go too far away from this camera. And it's like, it's so technical that you're like, so it was like a little overwhelming, but it was good. It was fun. It was because it was learning something new. And I still, to this day, I'm like, I got paid for that. Like,
and now, so were you still doing some coaching while you were acting? Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I was coaching. I mean, just really, it's funny because kind of like what you're doing in terms of, sharing a little insight of pursuing life's goals and things like that. Like, I worked as a coach more on that kind of spiritual, mental side of things, where the actual technique stuff was very easy for me. I could knock that out with them in a matter of minutes. Just like, hold your eye line here a little bit more, really feel the intention of this moment. Like, this is a transition, find that. Like, that kind of stuff was easy. What I really worked with my clients, particularly the ones that I had like an ongoing relationship with, was really the mind F, right? Like all that, getting over that mental side of auditioning and this business and all that. It's so like, some of my friends called me the Audition Doctor because just worked through that.
I would imagine you probably had to help people see themselves sometimes differently than they could, because that's really what a lot of us suffer from, is that we want this life, we want to be this individual, but sometimes through no fault of other people, like we take other people's opinions and we take other
Yeah.
people's thoughts, going right back to all of that about who we are or what we're supposed to be. And it's very difficult to then see ourselves as this other person through
I,
a variety of reasons.
yeah, I think innately we all seek validation, right?
Yeah.
We all just want validation that yes, you are doing what you're supposed to be doing. Yes, you are good at what you do. Yes, you made the right choice. And so part of my job with my clients was to say, you need to validate yourself because nobody else is going to give it to you. So
Yeah.
once you validate yourself, you're good, right? And so that's a part of, and we all go through that struggle. But
Mhm.
the reality is once you give yourself validation and have the confidence in that, you're unstoppable. No matter what you're doing, whether you're a salesperson, an actor, whatever. It
Mhm.
as soon as you embrace, oh no, I am good at this, and oh, I
Mhm.
am supposed to be doing this. Nobody's stopping you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not a matter of if, it's always just a matter of when.
That's it. It's opportunity, right? It's what is that saying? Um Success is when luck meets opportunity,
Opportunity.
or
Yeah.
or whatever that saying is, but
Some
it's true. It's like, again, in the the lessons and blessings kind of thing. It's look, I'm currently working on a project that has tested every bit of actually all projects that I work on test every part of it. But this one has just been, particularly challenging. And I constantly find myself saying, well, it wasn't the right time. So I can fight it. I can be depressed about it. I can be, like, oh, but we have to do it. Okay, but it's not the right time. So until it's the time that it's supposed to be made, you're stressing yourself out for nothing.
Yeah, I feel like it's like a flow thing, right? Like
Mhm.
sometimes it's like stop trying to fit a square peg into a round
Yeah,
hole and just let it
totally.
kind of go where it's supposed to.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I really want to get into, you had your first production was Casting by, correct?
Yeah.
Which was probably, as I'm learning now about your story, which I didn't know. We've known each other for, we're not going to say how long, but understanding that must
Listen,
have
I'll
been.
say it. I graduated in 93. You graduated in 92. It's okay.
um,
I'm old. It's fine.
it's fine. I embrace being 47. It's
I
really
don't
do.
care. I mean, honestly, I'm like,
I
I
feel
am
great at
45 years
47.
old.
Listen, and I wish I felt like this when I was 30. Legit. I feel
I'm like, I'm
so,
okay with it.
yeah. But that must have been a nice way to kind of, one, take this new step for yourself and really tell a story of kind of the life that you led for a long time.
Yeah, and that's again in this kind of weird, like, finding your purpose thing. I only got into producing because I was kind of forced into it. I had no interest in producing. I worked with some of the best producers in this business, never even once thought, oh, that looks fun. Never. But when I was living this pursuing acting life, I was finding myself incredibly bored. I am
Yeah.
a really intellectually driven person. And so there was only so much, like, hiking the canyon and keeping in shape and, blah, 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 to pursue this actress life that I could handle, because I was feeling like I am going crazy. And
Mm.
so I had lunch one day with a friend of mine, who's also a casting director, Joanna Colbert, and she and I just started talking about, like, where we came from in the casting world. And I said, oh, I actually worked for Marion Doherty. And she was like, oh, that's so funny because I worked for Juliet Taylor and Juliet worked for Marion and blah, blah, blah. And we just kind of started spitballing this idea of, like, well, it would be really interesting to, like, share Marion's stories because she had all these incredible stories. And for those who don't know, one, watch the film Casting By,
Mhm.
but two, it's about my first boss in this business, Marion Doherty, who was really like the first casting director, meaning
Mm.
there was a system in place where actors were on contract with studios. And so the actors that you saw in films back in the day were were put in those roles by the studio. Well, then this casting director role kind of came to be, where she would, or he would, be responsible for finding actors to put into productions. And so Marion kind of pioneered that profession. And so when I was interning for her at Warner Brothers, she would be telling me stories while we were smoking cigarettes in the executive building about, giving James Dean his first role, and Paul Newman and Robert Redford and Danny Glover.
Wild.
I was like, what? And so Joanna and I decided, okay, like, let's do this. Let's try to make a film.
Let's tell
We
her story.
hired, and we hired a producer who just failed and kind of like wanted to leave the project and go move to Greece and whatever. And so I just found myself kind of thinking, all right, well, I guess I'm going to have to do it. Like, I'll have to produce this. And it literally was the decision that I made that led me to my purpose, because doing that, producing that film, drove me intellectually, emotionally, like everything. I just felt like, yes, I like doing this.
You could put yourself into this work.
Yeah, I just fully, and it drove me, and it challenged me, and irritated me, but like I loved it. And I'm a really big, I'm a seller. Like, I can say, I think we should all know what our strengths are and what we do. And one of my biggest strengths is I can sell anything. Like, and if I believe in it, I definitely can sell. And so that's a big asset to have as a producer, because you're selling. Well, I mean, think about it. Like, investors, like, if you were to say to somebody, you should invest in a movie, you're basically saying, do you want to lose money? Because it's like, it's not a wise choice. But if you're passionate about why you're telling the story and what you're doing and what it's capable of achieving, then you can sell anything. And that's kind of what we did with Casting Bites. I so believed in Marion's story. I so believed in people's interest in knowing these stories that I was able to sell it to anybody I needed to in order to get this film made. And we did that. And Tom Donahue was the director, who did an incredible job. And we literally, I mean, and this is not in conceit, I'm just saying, the film did really well in terms of a first outing of a film. It did dream case scenario for premiering at Toronto, selling to HBO, Emmy nomination, and all of it. It was just, we did really well. So it just started my whole producing life.
I love that. And it's such an amazing way to just, again, you take all of these different kind of aspects of your life that we know just kind of lead us and continue us into different directions, right? Because if we can always, I love just saying that we're always able to explore new boundaries for ourselves. And so if that's the case, then we can always just be growing and always just be exploring something for ourselves. And that's fantastic. And
one of my favorite, sorry, did I interrupt?
No.
One of my favorite quotes is, if I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room.
Yeah.
And so I always feel like you should never want to stop learning or growing, and the second they feel like you know it all or you don't have any more to learn, well, one, I would love to meet you, but two, like that, you should continually want to grow.
Yeah. And so that film, I remember seeing all of the amazing pictures that you were posting when you were, releasing that. I mean, you got to meet some pretty amazing people that, you don't really get the opportunity to meet. So what was, just in hearing all the people's stories, I mean, I would imagine, how was that whole aspect for you? Because I know it was all relating back to how they get started in the business and Marion and all of that stuff. But I mean, just being able to sit down with people and get that type of content had to been.
I think one, a couple things stood out to me. One is, well, I don't know if you remember what my dad did, but growing up, my dad was one of the top executives for Spalding Sports.
Yeah.
And he was really instrumental in like the NBA, getting Spalding NBA, and doing endorsement deals. He did some of the first endorsement deals with professional athletes. And so
Yep.
growing up, we were around people like Larry Bird and Dr. J and Magic Johnson. And
yeah. I remember
Jimmy
seeing some of
Rice.
those. I remember seeing some of those side basketballs at your house.
Oh, I have a funny story about one of those. You have to
Yeah.
remind me to tell you that. But
Okay.
but so growing up, we were around some of these larger than life celebrity like
Mhm.
figures, especially Massachusetts because it's such a sports state. But so I think the first thing that going through the process of casting by reminded me of is we're all human, right?
I love that.
Like we went and we had this incredible day with Robert Duvall. We actually went to his ranch in Virginia, and his wife made us like bread pudding and little sandwiches. And after we did the interview with him, we sat on his ranch and just talked about the movie business.
Mhm.
And it was like this incredible day. And the overriding factor wasn't like, oh my gosh, we were with
Yeah.
Robert Duvall. It was like,
just-
oh my gosh, what a cool guy. What
That's it.
a great guy. And the second thing that really kind of stood out to me through the whole process was that we all long for somebody to just believe in us and as much as we believe in ourselves sometimes, or to take a chance on us. And I think look, Casting By was probably one of the largest actually I know it was one of the largest assemblies of legendary talent like that in one film.
Yeah.
And I believe that the reason I was able to achieve that is because we tapped into a time in their lives that was before all of the fame, right?
Mhm.
Before all of the approaches for interviews where it's talking about like, what was it like working with this director? What was it like working with this co-star? We're taking them back to a time where we say, what was it like when nobody believed in you and this woman
Did.
changed your life?
Yeah. And because like everyone has a pivotal moment
Yeah.
of that whole aspect, regardless of success, you know what I mean?
Yep.
or perceived success, you know what I mean, as far as like recognition and things like that, because there's certainly a lot of people who have achieved a lot of things that a lot of people don't know about, but there is that common thread.
Yeah, and I think that's what made the film. It was very important to us that we weren't just telling a film centric or a entertainment industry only film.
Yeah.
We knew that the underdog idea is a universal idea, right? Like there were stories of actors who weren't supposed to get the part, but something happened, or Marion fought for them or whatever, and they got this part and that changed their life. That taps into people who aren't necessarily in the entertainment industry, but who are trying to get this opportunity or get this moment in life, and they can connect to like, oh, if that could happen for them, it could happen for me too. And I think that's really important in any project I work on, or my producing partner. We really the idea of connecting and being able to relate, like relatability is huge. You want an audience to somehow watch that and feel some kind of personal connection.
No, that's fantastic. And I would imagine that what some of you and Mike are doing with the camper allows you some creative time to sometimes just sit and think about future projects or things.
Yeah. So I'm going to elaborate in case whoever cares or is watching. So my husband and I, it was last July, every 4th of July, we go up to Maine to see my family. And it's like the one time of year that we all get together. And because of COVID this year, if you remember, it was right before the 4th of July that numbers just took off.
I remember my sister was at a Celtics game March 5th.
Yeah.
And it was at that game that somebody tested positive
Oh, no way.
that they didn't realize until
Was
like
COVID? Yeah.
March 7th or 8th. And then because that was the big,
Yeah.
there was a big convention,
Yeah.
pharmaceutical convention in Boston.
Crazy. Well,
Yeah.
funny too is it was my father. We were having a retirement party for him on March 14th, and
Mm.
it was the week leading up to March 14th that they started closing. So we were like, do we cancel this? What do we do? And we ultimately wound up having it. Some people couldn't attend, but
Yeah.
really the majority of people did, and we were able to see our family and all be together. And it was that next week that we went into lockdown.
Everything locked down.
But this was like leading into the 4th of July. We had that summer spike,
Mhm.
and I, was fighting it because in my mind I was like, no, we're going to Maine. No, we are going to see my family. Like, we are doing this. And it was devastating to me when I realized, like, no, actually we can't go because we can't get on a plane, because we can't potentially risk getting my parents sick. And so how do you get around that? You buy a camper and drive up to Maine.
Yeah. And you guys rented one, right? For a weekend, tested it out, and then
that was when Mike knew that he had me, because he always wanted a camper. And for Father's Day, I surprised him and I rented a camper locally here in Texas. And we spent a weekend on a lake with the boys in this camper. And that was when, and he was right, because like, I was like, oh, I could probably do this. Like, I'm not a big camper person per se, but if I have my own bathroom and my own kitchen, and like, I could probably do that. And so that was when I was first like, okay. And then it was when we had to cancel the trip to Maine that I was like, yep, we're buying a camper. That's happening.
Let's get a camper.
Yeah. And we did.
And it's such a nice way to just kind of travel, right? Like, see a lot of different places that typically you don't see, as well as just take some downtime, decompress.
It was one of, we keep saying there was this whole world of camping and campers that we didn't even know existed. Like, there's this whole underbelly of this camper life that people aren't aware of. That is amazing. And it was really awesome because, one, we had the ability to not feel like we were trapped by COVID.
Yeah.
So we would take off, and we've seen so many Texas state parks, and state parks, by the way, kick ass. Yeah. And so we were able to escape kind of that pressure cooker of COVID, because we felt like we were living, we were getting out. And I think that's one of the beautiful things, again, lessons and blessings, because COVID is a real bitch. I really feel like one of the blessings was that it forced us to make this decision, which in turn forced us to start really enjoying how beautiful our country is, and enjoying the fact that there are state parks around everybody that you can go to. And I didn't fully appreciate how much peace and calm just being in a setting like that is. Yeah. And so it was a game changer for us, just in terms of life and living life. And, unfortunately, Mike lost both of his parents within 1 year. Yeah. And it was really, his mom in particular was just a devastating blow, because it was not expected. She had a stroke. She started to recover, had a second stroke, and it was just a bad deal.
Yeah.
And Mike and I really went through a good, 2 to 3 years of nothing but just bad. It was just loss and death and just bad. Yeah. And I feel like it really flipped a switch for Mike and I, where we realized, you know what, screw it. We only live once. We're not going to save for the retirement thing. We're going to go buy a freaking camper and enjoy life, because nothing is promised. Every day is a gift. And we really, I feel like it was because we went through that time that we wake up every day appreciating everything we have and wanting to live and enjoy life.
That's it, right? Like, stop wasting weeks and days and minutes, really. And that's what led me to this, journaling for myself was just, it was like,
Yeah.
what do I want? And then how did I do? And
Yeah.
then what do I want?
Love
And then
that.
how did I do? And
Love
it was
that.
just that continuous process and this continuous evolution of, who I am.
And I'm so inspired by you, Scott. I'll tell you,
I appreciate that.
watching what you went through with your mom, I mean, my mom has a brain injury. I don't know if you knew that, but she
No.
had a brain hemorrhage back when I was in college.
Mm,
That here, what happened is my dad had gotten a job in California. My mom moved out with him, and we had just visited them for winter break. And it was the next week that my mom had started to feel sick. She had a cold, whatever. Well, what had happened is her doctor was away, and the doctor covering for her doctor prescribed a medication that interacted with her Coumadin and literally thinned her blood to the point that it just started seeping in her brain. And she had a massive hemorrhage. And it was within a matter of hours that my dad was on the phone with us, and my sisters and I had to get on a plane. My brother was already there, flew out, and about maybe an hour after we got there, the surgeon came out and said, unfortunately, she started hemorrhaging again. And at this point, you're just going to have to let nature take its course. She's not going to survive this. And if she does, she will be non-functional. And to my father's credit, we were all sobbing and crying. And my dad said, "You don't know my wife. Give her an inch, she'll take a mile. You're doing the surgery." And
mm,
he was crying, my dad, and he said, "I don't want you to mistake these tears for me making
sure.
an emotional decision. I'm telling you, you don't know my wife."
Yeah.
And the surgeon hesitated. He did not want to do this. And he said, "Okay, I'll get you the papers." And he came back, and my dad signed the papers. He did the surgery. And if you saw my mom sees neurologists today that are like,
Yeah.
"There's no way that this happened to you,"
Hmm.
because she's a fighter. But it unfortunately, she's 99%, right? Like, nobody would
Sure.
know,
Yeah.
but she knows, and we know there are things that aren't
They're
there.
just a little different.
Yes. And so when I saw, knowing what we had gone through with the struggle with my mom, which was hands down the worst experience of my entire life, um, to see you,
I know.
it was just the ultimate sign of love to see you take care of your mom the way that you did. And I
Yeah.
think that to be able to channel that into what you're doing now, talk about finding your purpose. I mean, I think that you
That was
don't
such a create, and not to cut you off, and I appreciate
no,
that
please,
so,
yeah,
so much.
please cut
No,
me off.
I know. That whole journey that, my sister, my wife, that I took, that, it was wild. And I never anticipated any of that, because originally, like, she was going to go live with my sister, and I was only doing this for a short period of time. And
Right.
then, my sister was having her family, and it was just like, okay, this just isn't going to work. Um, and so I went through a lot of, I went through a lot of emotions,
Yeah.
from denial to frustration and anger and resentment. And I finally came upon gratitude, and that changed my life.
Yeah.
Just having the ability to be grateful to give this experience to my mom, it really became poetic for me, because
Yeah.
I went full circle with her and on our journey. And um, yeah, it just allowed me to look at things completely different. And I don't want other people to have to go through a journey like that to find purpose, to find
Right.
passion, to
Yeah.
know or to just go through 40 years just kind of floating along and not really finding any of that.
Yeah.
Like, it's out there, and it's like, just go get it, because
Yeah.
life is too short.
Yeah. And we get boggled down in the nonsensical, doesn't matter shit. Like,
Yeah.
like if we could realize how much we stress out about shit that does not matter. Like, we would take so much pressure off ourselves.
Honestly, just even launching this podcast, I had been thinking about it. I had been thinking about it. And again, I was nervous because I had never done anything. I didn't even listen to podcasts. Like, I didn't even know where to go. I had asked my buddy, I was just like, how do I even find a podcast? And then, so thinking about creating one was completely off the radar for me, even though I was like thinking about it.
Yeah.
And then, but taking that first step took me a long time. But then once I did, I was just like, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. And I know from a fact, when that happens, that's a good sign. And so I was just like off to the races.
But I have to say, it's important what you're saying. And this is what people need to know is it's really not difficult to do anything that you want to do. All you have to do is take one step. Like you knew nothing about producing a podcast and starring in a podcast or whatever. Like, but you were like, oh, I guess I can try this. I knew nothing about producing. I didn't know how to produce anything, but I was like, we're screwed. I got to do something. So I'm going to try this.
Either I step in or this potentially fails, and it's not going to fail. So what do we have to do?
And that's the thing. It's just one step. And I love the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. And like, that's really what it takes. Like, so figure out how to fix this one little problem, or figure out how to do this one little thing, and then get to the next little thing. And then eventually you're living a life. And, look, I'm not oblivious to the fact that people have to pay bills. Like, life has to happen. You can't just say, well, I'm going to pursue my dreams and everything poof is magic. I totally get it. I was in that situation. And I literally remember like countless times lying on my apartment floor in New York City, sobbing because I had no idea how I was going to pay my bills. How was I going to feed myself? I didn't want to complain to my parents again because they had helped me enough. And it was just like this horrible feeling. But, I will say, nobody's saying you have to like give up your means of making a life. But if there's something you feel that you should be doing, dedicate time to doing it. You can take an hour a week and dedicate it towards something that brings you joy or pleasure.
And I love an analogy, and I know we're getting close to an hour.
Oh my gosh. I just, oh, wow. Time flies when you're having fun.
But it does. But I tell people, think of your 24 hours as a glass jar. If you don't put those big stones in the glass jar first, your priorities, the things that, mean the most to you, when you start putting other people's priorities into that glass jar, you're then never able to put those other big stones back in. And so you have to start that way. And if you don't know what those priorities are, just start thinking about them, start understanding it, and make yourself a priority.
That's
give yourself 30 minutes of whatever it is that you need so that you can do these things for yourself, and you can find time. Time is amazing.
That's what that's the one thing I will say is we are all very good at making excuses, but that's all they are. They're excuses, and they're not hurting anybody but yourself. So when you make the decision that I've always wanted to do this, or I've always felt like this is my calling, if you're not finding at least an hour a week, which is not a lot, or even 5 minutes,
a half hour a day,
then
wake up a half hour earlier. Yeah, exactly. Like it really is. It's amazing.
And here's the talking about the universe and attraction and blah, blah, blah. You'll be shocked at how 5 minutes dedicated towards this one thing will lead to something else good. Will lead to something else good. Will lead to something else good. Like, it's a chain reaction. Set the intention.
Is. Yeah, no, 100%. Because a lot of it, like even some of the things that I do now, like I was never an endurance athlete. In high school, I was the guy, I mean, you knew me, I was a big guy.
Yeah.
For me to run 2 miles I had to do it during double sessions because I could never make my time. That just wasn't. But then I go off, I ran a half marathon. I know
now you and Kathy are all like all jacked.
No, but I've rode 2.5 at one sitting. I did a 2.5 marathons. And it was one of those things where I could never see myself as this individual, but I started doing something else for myself, which then allowed me to continue to evolve into doing something else. And this is my journey. And it's not anybody else's, but I enjoy it because, I row an hour a day. It gives me mental clarity. It gives me
I'm
physical
telling you,
strength. It,
I got
you
very
know,
lazy over the COVID time and like gained like 10 pounds, not thrilled about it. But I keep saying, and I've always talked to my brother about this because my brother is like, I don't know if you remember, he was a huge
of
athlete
course.
in high
Listen, I
school.
remember I went back to, when I didn't go to away to college. I
Yeah.
went back and I coached freshman football.
Oh, right,
So
right. Yeah.
yeah, no, your brother and I go back.
Yeah. And totally forgot about that. But, we always talk about this idea that yes, the getting in shape and looking good is a bonus, but that's not really the why of being active and working out and doing it, because mentally we feel at our strongest. We feel confident, we feel
Yeah.
engaged. And so like that for, I mean, not to sidetrack from what you were saying, but like
No, but
that whole like waking up and making it a part of your day, man, it just totally changes everything. Even going for my walks, like my walks are my meditation time.
yeah, and I wouldn't, and please don't say even going for my walks,
I
because
know, I know.
walking is a great thing for people
Yeah,
to do. It really is. Like,
yeah.
and that's what really people like don't understand. It's like, oh, I'm going to go back to the gym, and then they want to go back 5 days a week and all of these different things. And it's just like, you don't have to go to an extreme. If you want to do something good for yourself, in
Anything.
a walk, half-hour walk, 15 minutes of
Yeah,
meditation, there
anything.
are,
5 minutes
there's
of meditation.
5 minutes of it.
There's 5 minute guided meditations online.
I love, I started to get into quarantine. We lost our morning workout routine,
Yeah.
and I had wanted to find meditation. I had been trying to do it, could never find a good routine for it.
Mhm.
And that became my new morning routine, and it was a game
it's
changer.
it's such a game changer. Well, another funny side note of the many things that Kiley has done is I actually was certified to teach yoga back
Yeah.
in like 2009 or something, and that was a huge eye opener for me because I went in it to like I was like I'm gonna get super buff, but I wasn't prepared for that spiritual side of it,
Hmm.
and meditation is so beneficial for us. We have no idea
Idea.
what
Totally.
it does for us.
I was so intimidated the first time I went to a yoga class that I didn't go in, and then I went back, only when my wife took me. But then I became, I for like a good 6 months before I started CrossFit, I was doing yoga five,
It's really,
6 days a week, and
I'm gonna
but it was
advocate it. Yeah.
so humbling. The first time I went, I was humbled like I had never been before. And the best thing about it was that the sign at the door said, "Leave your ego at the door."
I was just gonna say.
And
Yep. I was gonna say.
that was amazing for me.
For anybody who is going to consider doing yoga, I will tell you the very principle of yoga is to go at your own pace. Do not
Hmm.
be in competition. Also realize that like teachers aren't really watching everybody in the class, so be very careful because you can hurt yourself.
Hmm.
But really go at your own pace. That is the very essence of yoga. The asanas, the poses in yoga, they were formed from meditation. So basically you would have these people that were like trying to meditate and putting it into a physical form. Those
Mm.
became the asanas, which are the poses in yoga. And so if you think about going through these poses, they're only really beneficial if you're using them the way they're supposed to be used, which is at your pace,
Hmm.
your flow.
And that's where, like, breathing plays a huge part,
Yeah.
letting go of all of the distraction and just focusing on kind of where you are and what you're doing. and
Yeah.
and yeah, it's a great practice. And I
And
and I do a lot of nose breathing too now with my rowing and all of that, because
pranayama.
it's yeah,
Well,
so good.
but just back to the working out thing, I think something that's also really important, just in terms of success, is finding the right partner. Because your whole working out thing, I noticed you and Kathy were doing that together, and like, and Mike and listen, I mean, yes, my life had clearly already started, but I feel like re-meeting
Yeah.
Mike was the start of my life. He is my everything.
Hmm.
He has brought so much more to who I am as a person. And so, I think it's um it's mind-blowing to me because I didn't find him till so much later in life, right? But like watching you and Kathy like commit to this new lifestyle that you were doing, like, you have to say, it doesn't require the other person, but my God, does it make things so much better to have that other person?
Yes, again, it's an individual journey, but it's so much easier with support,
Yeah.
and support and mentorship goes a long way in all aspects of life. But yeah, from the right partner, somebody who's going to encourage you to do these things, somebody that is going to lead by example and kind of help
And
you
that can be
get
a
there.
friend
Because
too, by the way. I'm not saying like,
yes, oh yeah,
because I don't want it to be like, well, what if I
I don't have a
haven't
partner,
found
but
my
yeah, no,
soulmate
it's
genius?
anybody. And
Yeah,
well,
it could
no,
be
and that's it. And again, it's anybody that surround yourself with individuals that support you instead
lift you up.
of, kind of put self-doubt or anything like that.
Naysayers.
Because yeah, you're only going to get to explore new things. And I didn't, Kathy was a CrossFitter before I even attempted it. And I remember, she had been doing it for like a year before, and I see these pictures and I see these guys with, they're taking pictures and they're working out with their shirts off and they're ripped. And I'm just like, one, what kind of workout place are you going to?
I don't know that I like that.
And then it was like, two, like, I need to do something to keep up. But then it was great because we helped each other through routines. We helped each other establish new healthy things for ourselves
Well, and you
that we
inspire
both
each other.
enjoy. Yeah. And it was and it's a fun journey when we get to do these things together. 100%.
Yep, totally.
She
Well, and
thinks she thinks some of the stuff I do is crazy now, but it's okay. She still
well,
supports it.
I mean,
So
that's
that's
marriage too, by the way. But I also, I do feel like, it, well, I was going to go on a whole nother side note, but again, I don't want to make it about relationships, but like, I literally am more excited by Mike's success than I am for my own. Like, it's so weird. It's so
yeah,
weird.
it's
Like that
fun.
it's crazy. Like, I don't know. I was like a big, whatever. Yeah, sure. You knew when you first met him that he was one.
Well,
Okay. And
but
then I met him and I'm
but
like, oh.
I think that it goes to just another kind of thought that, like, regardless of relationships or regardless of kind of who you're with, when you're open and you do things out of love, your world expands. And
Yeah,
so
yes, I think you nailed it. Yeah.
I think that it's just a matter of, I really learned how to love with Kathy. I didn't
Yeah.
have that before. Losing my
Yeah.
father at an early age allowed me to, or had me, I didn't really deal with it. And so I closed off. And so
Yeah.
I didn't want to experience that pain
Yeah.
again of losing somebody like that.
Yeah.
So my way of dealing with that was to
Was
not
to not
really,
have it.
was to not let anybody in
Yeah.
that way. And so, yeah, I think that that's just
But I think that you nailed it when you said, like, if you don't need, like, when I say that person could be your friend, it could also be yourself. Like, look, I successfully produced Casting by on my own. Like, I didn't even know Mike at that point. So like,
yeah.
it's not, I'm not saying like you can't have
Oh, of
success once you got,
course.
but what I'm saying is like how great it is when you have a buddy. Like Mike is my buddy. He's my best friend. He's like, and so that buddy could literally just be your buddy, or it could be a part of yourself. And I think a big part of that is, and I'm working on this too, because I think I'm very critical of myself and I'm very judgy of myself if I'm not living up to what I feel like my expectations are of myself. And so I'm really focusing on being kind to myself
Yeah.
and the words that I use towards myself. And I think
I
that
was just
we all
talking
need to
about
do
that
that.
this morning to somebody, about that, is
Yeah.
that we have to be very careful of the words that we say, not just to other people, but to
Particular to
ourselves,
ourselves.
because we hear that. And so over and over, when we say these things about ourselves, we start to believe it. And then
Yeah.
our world
And then
starts
that's
to shrink.
reflected in our life.
Yeah.
You really, I think it's something that we all need to wake up every morning and remind us of what badasses we are.
Yeah. I love it. I love it.
Well, this was really fun.
This was fantastic, Kate. I listen. I truly enjoy Sorry.
A droid? I'm a
droid. I truly enjoyed this whole, this whole conversation, and really just being a role model for other people to emulate, really, following, the
I
things
don't
that
know. I
you've
hope, but
wanted. No, really, it is, it's a nice way to really kind of put yourself out there and follow your passions, which, people lead by example. Other people see that, and, that's the fun in all of it. So,
yeah, and I think
again,
it again, it's like nobody's saying that you have to do everything today, but you only get one shot at life. So like if you're not happy,
just
start to
start.
reevaluate. Like
Yeah,
really think to yourself, what brings me joy? How can I take one tiny step to get me that?
excellent.